Welcome. Today's lesson is just a lesson about a formula. I would like to show you how they come up with the formula, but just due to lack of time, I'm just going to show you the formula. And if you would like to know how we get the formula, ask me in class. But all quadratics can be written in this standard form, which is a number times x squared plus a number times x plus c equals 0, or ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a, b, and c are numbers. We can solve this equation, as long as it's equal to 0, by using this formula. This is called the quadratic formula, where we take the opposite of the b value, and we're both going to add it and then subtract it, because we're going to get two solutions. So we'll add once, and then we'll subtract once. This square root of b squared, that's the b term, squared, minus 4 times a times c, all of that divided by twice a. So again, I'd love to show you how we get the formula, but for right now, let's just show you how to use the formula. So for instance, on this quadratic right here, the first thing I would do is write down that a equals 1, because that's the number in front of the x squared. B equals 8. That's the number that sits in front of the x. And c equals -3. Always include the sign. So -3. Now I'm going to look at this formula. I'm going to do exactly what it says. I'm going to go x equals minus b. B was 8, so I'm going to do -8 plus or minus the square root of b squared. So I'm going to do this slowly this time. That's 8 squared. And I'm going to put that in parentheses, because one of the biggest mistakes students make is if b is negative. B is negative. A lot of students do a -8 times a -8 and put -64. But a negative times a negative is always positive. This b squared will always come out to be a positive number in the beginning. But then we're going to minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is -3. So I'm going to have a negative times a negative, and that's going to end up becoming plus in a minute, all over 2 times a, where a is 1. Now you just simplify and reduce. So I have a -8 plus or minus the square root. 8 squared is 64. Negative times a negative is going to be plus. 4 times 3 is 12, times the 1 is still 12, all over 2. Well, that's going to equal 8 plus or minus the square root. 64 plus 12 is going to be 76, all over 2. Now, 76, I believe, doesn't have any factors that can be square rooted. Let's see, 76, that's 2, that's going to be 3, and 8. Oh, so 4 goes into it, so that's 4. That's going to be 1 and 9. Yep, so square root of 76 is the same as the square root of 4 times 9, which is 2 square roots of 19. So my solutions are, I'm going to do and I'm going to separate this into two fractions. I'm going to separate it into 8 over 2. So it's going to be 8 over 2, which is 4. Maybe I'll do this separately. 8 over 2 plus or minus 2 square roots of 19. 2 square roots of 19 over 2. Now again, that's going to reduce. So I get 4 plus the square root of 19, because the 2's cancel. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Or I get x. Whoops, you can't quite see that. I apologize. So again, what I did was I did 8 divided by 2. That gives me 4. And then the 2's cancel, gives me the square root of 19. And I did 1 as a plus. Now I'm doing the 1 as a minus. So I get 4 minus the square root of 19. So those would be my two solutions. 4 plus the square root of 19 and 4 minus the square root of 19. Most likely, if you're doing this on Excel, they might ask for a decimal, rounded to the nearest hundredth or something. So again, just take your calculator, square root 19, and add it to 4. And then take the square root of 19 and minus that number from 4. Don't accidentally do square root of 19 minus 4. That's another mistake students do. Do 4 minus whatever the square root of 19 is to get your decimal approximation. Let's do another one, and then I'll just let you get to work. So here is 7x squared plus 8x plus 2 equals 0. Again, I recommend writing down a is 7, b is 8, c is 2. And if any of these had a minus sign in front of them, I'd make these minus. Now again, I'm going to use my formula. So again, if you have not written this formula down, right here, I would write it down. Maybe even with this next to it so you know what's A, what's B, and what's C, right? I have this memorized because I do math so much. So I'm going to take minus the B, that's minus 8, plus or minus the square root of B squared. 8 squared is 64, minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. Now just remember the 64 was the B squared. That's where I got the 64 from. Now I get a minus 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 4 times 2 is 8 times 7. 8 times 7 is 56. All over 2 times 7 is 14. So I get a minus 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 56. Well, 14 minus 6 is going to be 8. That borrowed, so it's just the square root of 8 all over 14. So I get, and this is, by the way, this is x equals. So x equals a negative 8 over 14 plus or minus the square root of 8 over 14. Now, 8 breaks down to a 4 and a 2, so when I square root, I get 2 square roots of 2. So I'm going to write this square root of 8 as 2 square roots of 2, which I'm going to simplify. So again, my first solution, 8 over 14, both have a factor of 2, reduces to a negative 4/7 plus, now remember, 8 is 2 square roots of 2, and the 2 and the 14 reduce, so I'm left with just a square root of 2 over 7. Square root of 2 over 7 as one of my solutions. And then the other solution looks exactly the same, except instead of a plus, we have a minus square root of 2 over 7. Now again, I'm pretty sure that the iExcel program has you write these as decimals. So hopefully you can use your calculator correctly and get the right decimal. If you have troubles using a calculator, let me know and I will help you. But that is simply plugging in the values. So again, make sure you have this written down. And just remember that A, B, and C go right where the B is, the B squared, A, C, and then A, and then reduce. If you have questions, please bring them to class.